What's the first color that comes to your mind when you think of nature? Think of a color that gets a lot of hate. Yeah, you guessed it, green. Well, technically, you didn't guess it. It's in the title and, the thumbnail of this video. Anyway, hi, I am Karina. And today I'll be drawing with all the green art supplies that I own, except paint. I'll also be going over a topic that's been on my mind for a while now. It's relating to a conversation I heard, or not necessarily over here. I was in a taxi and
he was sort of talking to the person in the front, but you know that way where you're talking to everyone else as well, but that's the person you know. But it's a story you want to share with everyone else as well.
Yes, I'll be talking about that. The topic I'm going to talk about is also green. It's something we use in exchange for goods and services, and we use it as currency. I'm talking about money, and I'm going to specifically talk about the desperation for money. Yes, I understand that money is something that we all need. It's a way to live. That's why we go to school, to learn, and hopefully get a job in the future that can pay for all your finances and so forth. But I don't think I would ever want to get to a point where I'm desperate for money. And I guess, there are circumstances that cause that. But I'm referring to the point where you would do anything for it. No matter how dangerous it is, no matter how evil or humiliating it is. It gets to a point where, a certain line has to be drawn. That's also a reason why I don't play around with loans. Unless, there's a plan and, I have a way of getting that money back or paying that money back. But I wouldn't just take out a loan just like that. And I'm not saying that loans are bad. We all have to do what we have to do sometimes, whether it's to finance or further our educational future or to buy a house, whatever. We all got to do what we have to do. But yes, let's get into that story or conversation that I heard. But before that, let's get into what triggered that story from the driver. All right, so I got into the taxi and a few other people got in as well. In total, I believe there were 5 of us. Outside, we heard this commotion. That's before the taxi took off. We heard a commotion, and when we looked outside, we saw that it was about a group of men, and one of them being mentally challenged. This is a known fact for everyone in that area. The mentally challenged man, forgive me, I don't know his name, and if I did, I guess I wouldn't share it, because that would be rude. Anyway, he had a bad leg, right? So what they were doing, these men were racing with him, and if he won the race, it was a short race, by the way, they would pay him, and he did in fact win the race, and they paid him. And then after that, they said that if he could do push-ups, they would pay him as well. And he did that and he got paid. That's not a bad experience to me. I think that's okay. They weren't hurting him, nor was he hurting himself. He was doing fine. But I guess that kind of made the driver recall this incident a few years back. The story involved 2 men, right, in his neighborhood. One of these men had this giant jelly tree standing about 40 feet tall. And just to prevent any confusion, I'm talking about you guys also may call it coconut trees, but truth is it's a jelly before it becomes a coconut. If the jelly stays on the tree long enough, it becomes a coconut. Yeah, so that's why we call it jelly tree. But anyway, he had this big tree in his yard, right? And he wanted to get rid of some of the limbs, because the tree is so big that the limbs just grow and instead of fall, because they normally fall, and that's usually when the coconut would end up on the ground, but instead it just grew on top of each other. So it just was layering and layering up on each other. So he wanted someone to get rid of some of these limbs for him manually. And sadly, this is where that other man comes in. I believe he said that he could do it. He could cut the limbs off. And the man said, okay, if you can do it, I'll give you $4,000. And that's 4,000 Jamaican dollars. Just so you understand the figure I'm talking about, let me just put it or translate it in another popular currency, USD. So 4,000 Jamaican dollars once converted into USD dollars becomes $25.30. So honestly speaking, that's not a lot of money. But anyway, he takes up the offer and he proceeded to climb that giant jelly tree without no rope, no assistance, just him going up that tree. I believe with his cutlass. So I don't remember the story word for word or the exact sequence of events, but I just want to pass the message along. So, he might have had his cutlass with him because, how else would he chop the branches off? Or limbs. I mean, I've been referring to them as limbs thus far, so let's be consistent. Anyway, so he climbed the tree, and once he was near the top, once he reached the part where the branches were just overlapping each other, the ones that were supposed to fall, but they didn't fall for some reason. And because he wanted to get above that, the taxi driver said that he hang on to one of those limbs and it broke. He quickly grabbed onto another one, trying to get himself back onto the tree itself, and that also broke. And while I was listening to the story, I was really hoping he was going to say that somehow or, miraculously he would have just caught onto the tree or something like that. But that didn't happen. They said that the branches fell with them. And, because that tree was so high in the air, it wasn't just a straight fall. It was swerving and swerving, spinning a circle, until he finally hit the ground. The driver said that his feet and his butt hit the ground first. And I don't want to go into much details about what I heard because it was so sad and just so gruesome. There was a lot of blood. He survived, but he lost mobility in his legs, something punctured, and his spine was damaged. That man nearly lost his life. Over 4,000 Jamaican dollars. And the thing is, there are thousands of stories like this. Because this is not the first time I've heard something like this before. I heard about a man who pushed his finger inside of a lion's cage in Jamaica for, I think it's $100, 100 Jamaican dollars. That's less than $1 USD. And the lion bit his finger off. And I'm not sharing these stories, to use these persons as an example or anything like that. I don't ever want to be that heartless because it's just really sad. These persons, especially that first person, suffered a lot. That's so sad. The reason why I'm sharing these stories is because when I heard it changed something in me. I started viewing and seeing things a little bit different, and I think it's for the better. And I want that for you as well. I mean, if you receive it, it's up to you. This just reminds me of a phrase or a sentence I heard recently on YouTube. I don't remember which video I heard this in, but the man said, a man has 99 problems, but as soon as he gets sick, he has only one problem. So if you have to compromise your values or your belief or put yourself in danger in order to get money, you might just create that one problem, and all you'll be feeling is just regret. I'm saying all this just so that you can be careful. And I know that it's not easy, and it's a very sensitive topic. But if you find yourself in such a situation, just genuinely ask yourself, is this really worth it? And I know that life is all about risk, but we should also make it a point to choose our risk wisely. And that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you so much if you're still listening to me. It's just been a story that's been on my mind for a few days now. I just didn't want to hear it and just move on when it had me thinking a lot. But yes, please stay for the final reveal, and I'll see you next time. Bye.